So let's say you found the skeleton. How would you tell it to die? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
All right, everybody. I am here with Stephen for Leaving Young Earth Creationism. It's been a while since we've done one of these. Stephen, why don't you say hi to everybody, introduce yourself, and then we'll start asking questions about Leaving Young Earth Creationism.
Okay. Hi, I'm Steven, transgender. My pronouns are he, him. I'm 23 years old. I left Young Earth Creationism when I was somewhere around 19, 20, 21. And now I'm living in my own apartment. I've been living here for about a year. Hi.
Well, hello, and thank you for coming. Actually, as I was saying off air, you're the first person out of like four attempts, my four most recent attempts to get a Leaving Young Earth Creationism going, who's actually been able to make it. And of those four, or I guess of the three who didn't make it, only one of them gave me a heads up. So, I very much appreciate it. Let's see. SS2 Lannister says, "Can I call you Dr. Dino? You're more of a qualified PhD dinosaur than inmate 0645 2017. I agree. I am more qualified than he is to talk about basically anything. But no, you can't call me Dr. Dino because I don't have any postgraduate degrees that would qualify me.
That's academic fraud.
Yeah. So, let's see. So, I guess we'll just go into the Leaving Young Earth Creationism. So, how old were you when you became a Young Earth Creationist? Was that something that you were raised with, or?
Yeah, it was something I was raised with. My parents, well, at least my dad was hardcore into the Young Earth Creationism. I think my mom is too. And so I was raised with that stuff. I remember when I was a young child, still in elementary school, there was some sort of Answers in Genesis event at my church, like a multi-night
Okay.
thing, and my mom took me to that, and so we were there for that, and they were selling like little kids DVDs, and my mom got me one of those, and I still have the DVD menu song burned into my brain, as well as millions of dead things buried in mud layers laid down by water all over the earth. That had its own little song.
Nice. Wow. I never had any DVDs, but we did have at the church I grew up in. There were at least a couple times where they invited speakers to speak about creationism, and yeah, even before I left Young Earth Creationism, there were a few times where I was like, "This seems a little bit off." But okay, so that was something you were raised with, and so you mentioned AIG. Were there any other like big names in creationism that were influential when you were growing up, as far as like, teaching Young Earth Creationism?
At least when I got into middle school and high school, we did apology of science textbooks.
Okay.
I think that's what they're called, by Dr. J. Weil.
That sounds right, but like, I didn't ever have those textbooks because I didn't ever actually get any Young Earth schooling. But I've heard other people mention something with at least a similar name.
Yeah, I was homeschooled from kindergarten up until the 12th grade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I don't want to, like, completely tear down, like, homeschooling, because it is, can be very useful in a lot of circumstances. Like, especially I have several learning disabilities and stuff, and so homeschooling was very useful for that. But also, okay, so my parents decided to homeschool me for two primary reasons. One was because my mom noticed oh, she's so different from the other kids in terms of learning and things, and she could read when she was 2, but there's still other things she needs help on. It turns out that was because of the undiagnosed autism.
There you go. Yeah.
So homeschooling was very good for me for that, but also they wanted to homeschool me for religious reasons. Can't have our kid learning evolution and the Big Bang and all the liberal stuff. And from that standpoint, homeschooling turned out to be kind of dangerous.
Yeah, it's definitely a double-edged sword, and I've maintained, I think, pretty consistently that I'm not against homeschooling per se, but you have to be very careful.
Tread carefully.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
on the one hand, it is very easy to, or sorry, not, well, on the one hand, it's very possible to do things like get very individualized, special attention from, a homeschooling that is just not really replicable in like a public school or even a private school setting, right? So if you're someone who would benefit from having that focus from one instructor who can really help you specifically, it can be great. Also, have known people who homeschooled who had very high academic standards that were not matched by the local schools, and so their kids ended up doing exceptionally well on like standardized tests and entrance exams and stuff for colleges and whatnot. But on the other hand, it's also because there's so little oversight and there's so much out there that's just nonsense in terms of curricula being published for homeschoolers. You can also get things where you end up teaching kids all sorts of crazy pseudoscientific nonsense, and you start turning out people who just have, I mean, sure, they might have great English scores, but they can't reason their way out of a paper bag because they just have no critical thinking skills. So that's why it's...
My dad, when I was in high school, was very intent on teaching me like stuff like politics and social studies and American history, and so I got a very conservative education in all of those.
Yeah.
And now I'm a leftist.
Oh no.
Oh no.
All right. So you said earlier that you were about 19 when you left Young Earth Creationism. When was it that you started first like having questions about this? Like maybe it's not true.
I
mean, it doesn't have to be a year.
Right.
Like you can say like, high school-ish or something.
Right. I think actually it wasn't until I was in college, like it wasn't college specifically that did it, but it was around that like age range for me. I think maybe like I was about 19 when I first started having questions, and then 2021 when I've like started going, hey, I don't think this is true anymore.
Right.
And I think what first got the ball rolling for me actually had nothing to do with like age of the earth, origin of the universe, evolution, or anything. It was actually I was like starting to notice hey, maybe the Bible isn't literally true. Maybe it's not inerrant because of like there were stuff in Chronicles that didn't match the versions of the story given earlier. There was like a lot of the messianic prophecies that people hold up to be, see, Jesus really is the Messiah. I started noticing, hey, these don't exactly line up. Maybe the Bible's not perfectly inerrant. And so that first started to get me to question the other stuff.
Okay. So it was first noticing that there were things that didn't seem to line up internally about more theological subjects and less about like scientific subjects.
Yeah,
okay.
That was it for me.
Okay.
And then what got me like really thinking about like the science in general, like the science specifically, it was like I had heard growing up like, oh, radioactive radiometric dating is just a bunch of guesswork and it's so easy to get wrong. There are so many errors, and I just sort of like, okay, yeah, and didn't really question it until I think what finally got it, like the light bulb to click on in my head, was I was watching a video by Tom Scott, not Tom Scott, Tom Scott, who was doing a video on like alcohol and somehow like the fermenting process of the stuff that made the alcohol, like radiometric dating was relevant to that, and so he went into like carbon 14 and carbon 12, and like we can measure how long ago a thing died by how much of this it has, and he presented it in a way that just, oh, it's that simple? I've been brought up to think that it was all a bunch of hogwash, but it's that easy?
Okay.
And so that was first what got me to go, oh, the Earth might actually be old.
Right. So, I guess that kind of is what I was going to ask next. Is sort of like, so as you're kind of transitioning away from thinking about theologically, like the Bible has to be inerrant and whatnot, was there a period where you were like, okay, but I still think there are a lot of scientific problems with sort of, the mainstream scientific story about the history of the Earth and stuff? So was there a sort of like an in-between period where you were like, yeah, but I still think all this science stuff is iffy?
I think there may have been. I think for a while I may have been like the old Earth creationism, where it was like, yeah, the signs of geological ancientness are like genuinely there, but also God created the species as is.
Okay. So would that have been like a sort of a progressive creation view where like at different times God creates different species and that's why we have the record of faunal succession and whatnot? Or was it less well thought out, or was it different than that, or what?
I don't super remember, and I may have not actually had a hard, firm view on what I thought.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's perfectly fair. There are a lot of topics about which I have no firm view because I haven't thought about it enough, and it doesn't matter enough for me to take a stance. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's a perfectly reasonable place to be. So,
yeah.
Now, what do you think of the various creationists and creation, like, I guess, ministries or organizations or something whose material you consumed as a kid, now that you're no longer buying into that whole narrative? Like, do you have any kind of, like, if you could sit Ken Ham down and tell him what you really think of Answers in Genesis, what would it be?
Oh boy. So I was growing up, like I said, big into Answers in Genesis, and they published like VBS Vacation Bible School type things for kids to do over the summer, and I actually volunteered at a lot of them. And the first one I volunteered at was I was doing like a teaching station and like lessons about like the fossils, like Lucy and the Nebraska Man and the Piltdown Man. And there was a little saying we had, you can't make a monkey out of me. And they kept going on about there are no actual transitional fossils, and like going on about, oh, the Piltdown Man and the Nebraska Man were not true. And now I'm starting to realize that like there are transitional fossils, and there's more truth to some of these especially big name transitional fossils than we gave them credit for. And I don't super remember if it was the Piltdown Man or the Nebraska Man that was revealed to be a hoax, but the reason we know it's a hoax is because we've learned more about human evolution.
Yeah, that's the other side of that story that I feel like never actually gets addressed, because it was Piltdown that was a hoax, and Nebraska Man was just an honest mistake by a non-specialist, which is...
Yeah.
And so, Nebraska Man was never really taken seriously by the scientific community. There was some sensationalist news stories, but, I mean, that's because papers sell stories, they don't sell science. It's like, I'm sorry that even in, like, the early 20th century, essentially clickbait existed, but it did. It's just that it was done by newspapers instead of websites. But
You won't believe what scientists found in Nebraska.
exactly. But yeah, basically everyone who looked at that was just like, this is not sufficient to conclude that we have a hominin in North America, guy. Like, you got a worn down molar. That's not enough. And then later it was positively identified as a peccary molar. And so, like, it's... You listen to creationists talk about Nebraska, man, and they make it sound like it was like the poster child of human evolution for like 10 years. It's like, no one really cared because it was so unlikely to be true. And with Piltdown Man, it was like, at first, yeah, it was accepted because, you know, we didn't have really the technology to detect the forgery. But then it was, as time went on and more hominins were found in Africa, and it became more and more clear that, you know, humans evolved in Africa, people just started not caring so much about Piltdown, and then eventually you get to the point where they're like, there's something wrong here, right? Like, it doesn't match any of our other findings. Let's investigate. And lo and behold, they're like, oh, hey, yeah, it was a fake the whole time. And they toss it out, and it's because they had to know enough about evolution to know why it didn't fit, to bother investigating in the first place. Which is the thing that's like, that fake wouldn't have been discovered if not for evolution. So it's a very weird when creationists harp on that. I've even had some of them go ahead and like agree with Fred Hoyle that Archaeopteryx is fake. Yeah, there are some Kent Hovind does it. He'll argue that Archaeopteryx is actually a dinosaur fossil with that had thin layers of cement around the edges that chicken feathers were pressed into. And that was Fred Hoyle's claim way back in like the 60s or 70s, I think. Because Fred Hoyle, for some reason, was also an anti-evolutionist. I've never really understood that, but that's neither here nor there. So yeah, I think it's interesting what the things that a lot of creationists tend to focus on are like, if you look into it, like that's a thing that's a point against you. Maybe you don't want to focus on Piltdown Man. But like, I still want to say, like, if Ken Ham were here today, and he were soliciting your honest opinion about Answers in Genesis, what would you tell him?
I don't know what I'd say, to be honest.
That's fair. I mean, I imagine you don't spend most of your time thinking about what you would tell Ken Ham if you bet him.
Right.
No, that's fair.
Well, I just buzzed across the room.
So, sorry, go ahead.
I remember also, and I mentioned my biology textbooks. I remember there was a bit in there, even as dyed-in-the-wool young Earth creationist, that I thought was iffy, because they have these like questions throughout the book, and one of the questions was, some people say that the plague of blood in Exodus may have actually been a fungal bloom. How do we know that it was actually blood? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, the Bible says it was blood, but do we have any, like, outside evidence that it was actually blood? And I was perplexed by it. And I looked in the answer key, and the answer key said, we know it was blood because the Bible says it was blood.
Yeah, I remember having... And
I was like, dude, you can't say that. You can't say that.
Yeah, I remember having questions about that. Now, I was sometimes given better answers about things like that, but sometimes I wasn't. And I do remember in my childhood some people saying, oh, well, we know this story is true because it's in the Bible. And I'm like, okay, but the question is whether or not the Bible is right about this, and you can't just say that because it's in the Bible, therefore the Bible's right, because that works for every book. I could say, oh, hey, you know, I guess Muhammad's a prophet because it says in this book that he's a prophet. And
yeah, like, that was where I was at too.
Now, I do think that there are some things in the Bible that are actually accurate historical things, but the thing is, the reason we know that is because, you know, later evidence found that. Like, for instance, in the Gospel of Luke, a number of Roman officials are named by name, and for a while it wasn't known if any of those were real people, but then later on we found inscriptions and letters about them. It's like, okay, well then, not shockingly, this guy writing some 30 or 40 years after these public events got some names right. Nice.
Yeah, so, but people will use that as evidence, like, so the Bible might actually be right.
Well, I mean, I'll say this. That makes it more likely that it's right about other things than if nothing were confirming it, but it's also not sufficient to prove that it's right about other particulars.
Right.
Because it's one of those things where, like, if you have a source in history and it's making unlikely claims, if you can verify any claims, it does actually lend some support to the unlikely claims.
Right.
But not always enough to actually make that necessarily the case. I'm not really here to say to what degree that's the Bible, and I don't think that it's the same for every part of the Bible, because the Bible isn't one thing, it's a bunch of things, and I don't think that the accuracy of any one book stands or falls based on the other ones, but that's neither here nor there. So another question I have, though, is were there any like books or science communicators or anything like that who were an influence in getting you out of the anti-evolution ideas? Like, were anyone in particular, or any websites or anything like that?
I'm trying to think. Professor Dave, not specifically evolution, but like for the Big Bang, and yeah, a little evolution now that I think of it, and abiogenesis, and I know Paula G has done some videos where he'll interview scientists about stuff like that. A lot of times in response to stuff Ken Ham has said, and that was also a big help for me. Ironically, not ironically, but oddly, the one thing that like first started to get me thinking, oh, evolution might actually be true and the transitional fossils might actually exist, was another YouTube video about a different topic. This time it was someone had posted a Futurama clip. I was looking up to see where I don't want to live on this planet anymore had come from, and it turns out it comes from an episode about evolution and teaching creationism in the schools, and Professor Farnsworth started going over all these transitional fossils, and I was like, wait, those can't be real, can they?
Yep, they used all real names. Those are all real taxa.
Yep.
Yeah, I've recommended it before, but if you have access to Futurama, go watch A Clockwork Origin. It's one of the best of like the revival era of Futurama, and it is it starts off with creationists trying to get evolution out of the schools, and one of the leading creationist minds is Dr. Banjo, a talking orangutan, who comes to argue with Professor Farnsworth about evolution. So it's a very fun episode, and yeah, I highly recommend it. Futurama's a great show anyway. So that's. So it's interesting that Futurama ultimately is the source of you kind of getting out of anti-evolution. So I'm sure that Matt Groening would be happy to learn that. So on the extreme off chance that you watch, Matt, good job.
Good job.
Yeah, and the Lou animated play says, I love that episode. Yeah, everyone should. It's a great episode. And I think one of the things that I like about it is that it points out that, like, there's a false dichotomy in some cases. Like, evolution doesn't actually preclude there being a creator. And, like, a lot of people, especially creationists, I find think that it does. And it's always a weird thing to me, because, like, I don't really care if you believe in a creator or not, but could you stop pretending that it requires there not to be one? That's a separate argument. Like, it's not the same argument. We can have that as an argument, but there's no reason to talk about evolution per se in it.
Right.
So,
and people will always be like, oh, it's us versus those atheists. No, not really.
Actually, that reminds me, just today I got a very confusing comment of someone saying that I was pitting Christianity against evolution in a video of mine, and I'm like, I don't think I've ever done that. I mean, I've complained about certain versions of Christianity which reject evolution, but, like, yeah, I don't know. And the thing is, I find it mostly on the side of the creationists doing that thing.
Right.
I actually don't find a lot of science communicators, or even, people who are trying to promulgate atheism per se, who are like, oh, see, evolution is true, therefore no God. No,
right.
That doesn't really work. So So I think one of the other questions that I always like to ask is, has leaving young Earth creationism caused strain in relationships that you had before or still have? Because I know that there are a lot of people who that strains friendships, family bonds, and stuff like that. And if that's going to be too much to talk about, that's fine. We can not go there. But if you're comfortable talking about that, is that a thing that's happened?
Right. I haven't talked about it super publicly with people I know before, but I have mentioned when I was first starting to question things about around 19, I would mention to my parents and a friend of mine, hey, I'm having a crisis of faith, not specifically about young earth creationism, but about stuff in general.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, oh, I'll pray for you and make sure to help you get back to see the truth. And I was like, I don't really know if that's the best approach. I'd rather feel free to figure this stuff out on my own.
Well, to be fair, if they go off and pray for you, it doesn't stop you.
Right. But
um,
the thing that but the implication there was that
you have to
the
come back.
outcome I want the most is for you to not have these questions and for them
Right.
to be resolved and you coming back into the fold, into
Yeah.
our specific version of the fold.
Yeah, it would be nicer if there were, a heartfelt desire for you to reach a conclusion that you find justified, as opposed to
Right.
just agree with me.
Mm-hmm.
I do get the just. I do kind of get the just agree with me because there are a lot of people who I wish would agree with me on various things.
Right.
So I do get it, but yeah, I do try to have as my actual goal for people is I would like for you to have a conclusion that is well reasoned and that you can justify. That I think that is more important than just agreeing with someone is to have a well reasoned position on something that's important. So,
Yeah.
but it hasn't caused. So I guess for one thing, it's not terribly public that you're no longer a young Earth creationist, or is that now?
Yeah.
Okay. So, do you feel like that's something that you have to keep hiding, or it might cause problems?
Um, I don't know for sure. I guess we'll see.
I mean, do people know that you're doing this because this might make it pretty public?
Well, I don't think at least I don't think my parents will find this. And if they do, this isn't the first time we've had disagreements over ideology.
I kind of figured.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now
I mean,
yeah. My guess is that that's not your parents' favorite shirt.
I've actually not worn it around them.
That's yeah, I
But
can
I
see
do
why.
remember one time my dad came to drop something off at the apartment and I came to pick it up and I didn't realize until he had left that I was wearing my big rainbow heart HRC United Against Hate shirt.
Ah, okay. Well,
And that was awkward.
I'm glad that at least so far it does seem like you are still maintaining a pretty good relationship with your parents. That's not always something that's for certain when it comes to big
Yeah.
changes. So that's good because I have talked to people who not so much on the show, but I've talked to people who've you know entirely lost contact basically with their families after having big transitions in terms of their religious stance, whether it be uh, leaving a particular brand of Christianity or Christianity overall. I know someone who when he decided he wasn't a Christian anymore, let's see, his wife divorced him and now his two kids basically don't talk to him anymore.
Oh.
And it's less like, well, we'll invite you for funerals if there are any, bye. And it's just like,
Yeah.
wow, that's pretty rough. So I am glad that is not
Yeah.
what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, they don't properly gender me, but at least they haven't cut me off, which is good because I have needed my dad to help fix the toilet, and I asked them to help spot me money for rent before. So,
I mean, yeah, there are definitely levels of acceptance that are Still problematic, but I mean,
Yeah,
not cutting you out is a pretty big thing because a lot of people do. So
yeah.
I'm glad about that. And is things like religion or science something that you talk about with your parents, or is that just something you're just kind of like, let's just leave it. We don't really need to have that discussion.
Yeah, mine is let's just leave it. I don't want to broach this topic with them. That's a can of worms I don't want to open.
Yeah, I that was my position for quite a while. But my parents now know that I do this, so there's not a whole lot more room for being like like ambiguity with like my take on things like the age of the Earth. Um, Although they also have softened their stance on things like the age of the Earth and evolution since I was a kid. Like I remember at one point my mom caught me with Origin of Species, and it kind of felt like she had caught me with like an adult magazine. He was like, "What is this? Why
Yeah.
are you reading this?" And I'm like coming
For
up
some
with
reason,
excuses.
for some reason, my parents let. I was huge into Bill Nye when I was like third or fourth grade, and for some reason, my mom let me watch the episode about dinosaurs.
Uh oh. And I'm
Uh-oh.
sure that he was not taking a young Earth stance on dinosaurs.
Of course not.
No. Yeah. Well, that's actually one of the things that I hear people complain about. So just recently, my first video in my series about a talk that Dan Biddle from Genesis Apologetics did. He's like, "Oh, everywhere you turn, it's millions of years this and millions of years that. It's all over the place. It's steeped in the culture and movies and video games." And I'm just like, yeah, that's because only a tiny weird fringe of like oddly specific Christianity, at least in the United States, has really any problem with the science. And it's just as reasonable to complain about why gravity is in all these books and movies and video games. It's like, because if it weren't, it would be weird because everyone knows it's a thing. Like,
Right.
what else do you want from us? So yeah, it is kind of hard as a young Earth creationist. I remember to not end up seeing that everyone seems to disagree, and
Right.
I think it can go one of two ways. I think for some people it can be like, oh, why is it that like no one is on my side on this in this argument? But on the other hand, it can also easily go into the an us versus them mentality, and I think that's promoted in a lot of evangelical churches, especially the ones who are like young Earth creationism and stuff like that, because it's very easy to build up a us versus the world, and we're the persecuted minority who has the actual secret, well, not necessarily secret, but we have the actual truth and everyone else is denying it, and we're going to be persecuted for it. And you can see that in a lot of creationist like output, like Ken Ham's Answers News. It seems like every time I turn around, they're predicting the imminent internment of Christians being rounded up by the government. And it's just like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? No,
I
no
remember
one wants to do that.
my dad at one point sent me an email that had a phrase that was something along the lines of world that is becoming extremely hostile to Christians. And I was like, not really, my dude. I didn't actually respond to that email, but that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, there's a lot of that thing, and I'll be honest. Actually, one of the things that bothers me a lot about that is there are places where there's like legitimately very bad and pervasive persecution of Christians,
Right.
and young Earth creationists would rather talk about the fact that their kids end up learning about evolution in school, and it's like, you guys know that like a church got firebombed in Egypt last week, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Like, oh, Christians are persecuted. Oh, because of all the stuff there that's going on, like the actual religious persecution. No, because people are saying I have to be nice to gay people and call trans people by the gender they say they are.
yeah, it's like, I'm sorry, but like, I know you don't like that, but that's not what persecution is. The persecution
Right.
persecution isn't people pointing out that some of your ideas are unpopular and they consider it rude when you do things like don't refer to people the way they want to be referred to. That's not persecution. Persecution is things
Right.
like, oh, hey, your daughters are routinely kidnapped and forcibly converted to another religion and married off to strangers. That's a thing that happens to Christians in some places. It's not like, oh,
Right.
hey, if your neighbor asks you about your religion and you answer honestly, you can be put in jail indefinitely for blasphemy, that's persecution. That's a thing that happens in some places. That's not happening
that
here.
is.
So,
Right.
and I really, I don't like that, because it is actually an issue that I think gets overlooked in a lot of like modern discourse about human rights and such, is the persecution of Christians in various places around the world. You know, especially like
Right.
Central Asia and the Middle East and parts of North Africa. And it's
Right.
like, yeah, that's a real topic. But instead, the people who should be talking about that the most are busy complaining that, you know, some magazine posted an article about saying that humans have, I don't know, vitellogenin pseudogenes, and we don't think that's true. Like, okay, sorry guys, I just don't care that much that you don't think that vitellogenin pseudogenes are a thing, even though they obviously are.
Right.
And I realize I'm now just mentioning videos in my back catalog. Guys, if you haven't seen all my old videos,
Same Dino channel.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the back catalog, guys. I actually used some clips from 2019 videos that I have in one of my most recently completed videos. So you guys are going to get a blast from the past.
Yeah, I wasn't one of those people who was like, "Oh, I'm LGBT," and so that's leading me away from, like the church, because there was a while where I bought into the other stuff that the fundamentalist church was teaching me, and I just also happened to be trans. But I think like that sense of disconnect did help me to like pass the psychological hurdle of being willing to question other stuff.
Yeah, actually, I was going to be asking if that if things like, you know, sexual identity and stuff pushed you away theologically, because it did seem like it was primarily like there's just inconsistencies that you see that you're having trouble reconciling. But I can also see why that would push someone away too, although there are also more open churches that are options. But then again, they are also tend to be less likely to be things like Young Earth Creationist.
Yeah.
There aren't too many YEC LGBT friendly Christian groups out there. It's just there's not a whole lot of overlap in those groups. I guess I can't say there are none, but I would be surprised to find any. Okay. So, if you had something you were to say to people who are currently in the position you were in a few years ago, would you have anything that you would want them to say, or want to say to them? Sorry.
I think just like take things one step at a time, because I remember for me, a big obstacle was like feeling like I had to either be this specific young earth creationist, fundamentalist, evangelical Christian, or a huge atheist. And like a huge thing for me was realizing that I can take things bits and pieces and steps at a time, and like just because I disagree on one thing, that didn't invalidate the rest of my faith or the rest of who I was.
Okay. So I like that. You know, there's just because you're changing your mind on something, or the evidence seems to be pointing in a different direction than what you were expecting it to, you can follow that, and that doesn't have to change everything, you know?
Right.
And if it does, you can take that as a stepwise thing, right? Like, you don't have to change everything about your identity just because some part of it has been challenged. Now, maybe
it's like sort of a Marie Kondo approach. If something isn't working, just say thank you for its service and pass it along.
Yeah. Keep an uncluttered brain.
Yes.
I say that, but I have so much stuff in my brain.
I have ADHD.
So actually, we do have a question from Mark, and I'm going to be opening up questions very shortly, in like the next few minutes. So once I say we're open to audience questions, we're open. I'm going to give my little intro to the question section right now. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to try to go through in order that the questions are asked. And if there are any super chatted questions, those are going to go to the top of the list, and I can capture, you know, the super chats in a separate window, so I'll have access to them. So the first rule is just, if you have a question, put it in the chat after I say that we're open for questions. Mark, I'm going to try to get to yours when we do open, which is very shortly. And then, yeah, I'm going to go down in order, and Super Chats go first. So before we do that, though, is there anything else that you'd like to add about anything I didn't ask that you think is something that you'd like to have out there?
Trying to think. Not that comes to mind right now.
Okay.
I might think of something later.
All right. So Mark, I'm gonna go with Caesar. If that is not how your last name is pronounced, Mark, please let me know. Because English spelling is stupid. I'm gonna go with Caesar for now. Mark Caesar says, "Can you ask Stephen if he felt it a huge relief being true to himself and quote coming out?"
I mean, it was like really scary at first, like coming to grips with it, but like once I started to get a better grip on my identity, it did feel really nice to like finally have answers and finally have and knowing, like, having that sense of pride that I've pushed through to the other side and made this realization, and it helps to like have friends who are understanding and actively supportive, and so that was a big thing for me. And I think I was like around 17 or 18 when I first started to realize I was trans, so I'm about 5 years out from that. And like that first year or so was scary and stressful, but now I feel really good about who I am. And one of the benefits of moving out into my own place was I went to Pride and just was able to go board a bus and head down to Pride, and my parents never needed to know, and I don't think they even know now that I went.
So you're not sending them the link to this live stream?
Of course not.
That's fair. JS asks, so you are still a Christian? Also, sorry. Also, am I the only one who thinks that Ken Ham looks like a missing link? So, yeah, are you still a Christian? And if you would prefer not to answer that, I do always leave that option open for the questions about current religious positions.
I don't want to really go into that.
Okay, that's fair. But do you think that Ken Ham looks like a missing link?
I never noticed it until you pointed it out.
Okay. I actually think he looks suspiciously like a chimpanzee. So, yeah, I've mentioned that a few times that like
maybe he is that one guy from the Futurama episode.
he is Dr. Banjo. That's what it is. Ken Ham is Dr. Banjo. Actually, I wouldn't be too surprised if the writers based Dr. Banjo off of Ken Ham.
It wouldn't be surprising.
Yeah, so no, you're not the only one, JS. So I know that I think that Ken Ham kind of looks like a chimpanzee. Gutsa Gibbon agrees with me. And at least a few of my other guests have agreed with me on that. So let's see. I'm going to take a look for any other questions real quick. All right, I'm not seeing too many more questions. So guys, get questions in because we don't questions don't last forever. But let's see. So okay. This is from Jack Russell. What does Stephen think of Kent Hovind?
Growing up, no one else in my family or church was like super big on Kent Hovind. I think I might have been shown a video of his once or twice. But now that I've like watched more counter apologetics videos about him and like responding to him, I really do not care for him. And I think like I was I had started watching like the debate between, I think it was him and Professor Dave, and I just had to stop partway through because I couldn't handle it.
Yeah,
And
it's tough.
yeah, and like I think once you were doing a live stream with some other people where you were responding to Kent, and I couldn't finish that either.
I look, I have a special tolerance for Kent Hovind, but the thing is, after I do those streams and stuff, like it takes a toll. I have to like decompress, and like this is a little bit mask off, but like I do have fun doing stuff like Kent with Bent and whatnot. But there's a reason I can't just keep doing them, and there's also a reason why I take breaks from it. Like I have Eric with Erica, which at least is usually different claims with Eric Hovind, or why sometimes I'll do like I've started. I don't know if we're gonna do it regularly, but I started doing Matt with Maddie, where we're gonna do some other creationists named Matt with Maddie from Science Side Up, and we have a $5 super chat. Dapper Dinosaur, this is from Mark Caesar. Dapper Dinosaur, what beer do you like? Have one on me. So it sort of varies on the weather and the mood, but I do quite like wheat beers. I don't always want to go full barley. I have a little tendency for wheat beers. I feel like they're refreshing in a way that a lot of other beers aren't. I don't always want a very heavy beer, but on the other hand, if it is cold, I mean, I'll go for an Imperial Stout all the time if it's cold, because it makes me just get that, I don't know, whatever, it doesn't matter. There's your answer. I tend to like wheat beers in general. Let's see, we have some Klingon in the chat, which is always fun. This is one of the very few places you can go on YouTube where that's one of the languages you can use, and it will actually work for you. I don't think this is technically a question for you or I, but David DB22585. I'm going to start going with David numbers. Sorry. There's too many numbers. Perhaps Dr. Banjo is a descendant of Ken Ham. I'm okay with that as my headcanon. That works for me.
That sounds good.
Let's see. Mr. Lizard says, what do you think of the claim of dragon legends being caused by people seeing living dinosaurs?
Before the stream started, Dino and I were actually talking a little bit about this, and we were saying, like, just because people have talked about it doesn't necessarily mean it exists. And
yeah.
Look.
Yeah, that isn't evidence
Bulbasaur.
that isn't evidence of actual lizard plant hybrids in Japan.
Right. Although it's very sweet and nice.
Yeah. And
I named him Dennis.
I think a lot of it is just confirmation bias. Like, it would be cool for the creationists if there were dinosaurs, because they think that would disprove evolution somehow, even though it absolutely would not. Like, there is nothing about...
Like, it would be easier for them if dinosaurs had died before the flood.
Yeah. But then that comes into, like, questions like, okay, like, what happened? Why did they go extinct? I thought it was supposed to be, like, a perfect paradise Earth or something. Like, that, yeah.
Right.
I get why they do it.
And, like, the thing that a lot of people have pointed out is, like, maybe they saw fossils just like we did and have tried interpreting them just like we do.
Yeah. Well, and that's a definite possibility. I mean, it's hard to demonstrate, but there are a number of areas where it's like, okay, we know that the fossils of this creature can be found here, and this mythical creature kind of looks like maybe that kind of fossil could have been like the thing. So, like, we get things like, maybe the Cyclops was based on, Proboscidean skulls that were found in Europe, because they didn't have elephants there at the time that, the Greeks were settling in there, but there had been some in the Ice Age, and you find it and you think, oh, that weird nose hole, maybe that's an eye, because, or maybe griffins are based on Protoceratopsid finds in, Central and East Asia, which, I mean, we know those fossils are there. So, yeah, it's... I can't...
Well, like, just because people have talked about it doesn't mean it's true.
Right. Let's see. JS... okay, yes, this is a new question. What does Steven think of fundamental creationists like Ray Comfort, Kirk Cameron, or Todd Friel, if he has seen them.
Yeah, some of them start to blur together in my mind, so I'm not
Yeah.
sure if I could specifically go, oh yeah, this is this person. But I don't care for them either.
I find especially Ray Comfort to be a a particularly distasteful individual in how he goes about his rhetoric.
Yeah, me too.
I I really don't like the idea that you're just going to go to a college campus and ask random kids about evolution. And one of the things
Yeah, and
is
like, oh, this one kid didn't know how to answer the question. This proves evolution is dumb.
right. And there's one thing where it's like I think it was Trey the Explainer, who's a YouTuber who does a lot of various a lot of it's like sort of pseudoscience-y type like debunking content, and then some of it's also just like straight up, hey, this is a cool science thing. Um, but he actually talked to Ray Comfort in person at and was interviewed by Ray, if I remember correctly. And yeah, that interview wasn't there because he knew what he was talking about. So it's very clear to me that Ray Comfort is getting like just rando college kids who have no particular reason to be experts on like geology or biology or anything like that, and asking these questions that they're just not equipped to answer because it's not their field. But then when he
Right.
actually gets someone who does have good answers, he's just like, well, we just won't use that footage. And it's like, that's gross. That makes me feel dirty. And also in some of his movies, he's deceptively edited people. Like I think I'm pretty sure he deceptively edited was it The Raging Atheist? Even
Oh, I think
now
I remember that.
I've seen some of the unedited footage because apparently The Raging Atheist got some of that. And I will say I don't think The Raging Atheist did the best job possible in these
Right.
interviews, but he was still deceptively edited, and it's just like that's just it makes me feel dirty watching any Ray Comfort stuff because I know that it's deeply dishonest, and yeah,
I don't remember who this was. It might have been one of the people mentioned in the question, but Vice Rhino did a video on him recently, and this guy he was covering apparently suggested that anti-creationists think that creationists purposefully hid fossils on the tops of mountains. And this guy started getting mad about an argument he invented that doesn't actually exist.
that's weird.
Yeah.
This isn't a question, but I do want to read it. So David DB Numbers says, incidentally, I just watched your Hovind debate for the first time, and it's the closest I've ever seen Kent to come to actually expressing embarrassment. Yeah, when the debate turned to Kent just asking me questions and listening to the answer, like that's not something that's normal for him. I'm very proud of that debate. And I know this isn't the topic. I just want to say that, yeah, if you haven't seen that debate, I personally think it's excellent. My suggested way to watch it is my audio remaster, which is on the channel. Because if you want, I don't give Kent views. And if you watch the original upload, my audio isn't great. And so I one day actually just downloaded his audio and I remastered it and I normalized a lot of the audio levels. So that's my recommendation is watch my audio remaster of it. So, let's see. Joe Cyrus just says Ray Comfort with a banana emoji. Yes. You've seen his banana thing, right? About how the banana is the atheist's worst nightmare.
I think I might have. I know, like that sounds familiar, but I can't actually remember why he said it's the atheist's worst nightmare. Which is actually not, because it's actually an example of natural selection. Well, unnatural selection, but...
Oh, JS said it was Todd Friel who was angry at his own argument about skeptics believing creationists plant false evidence. He's even worse than Ray or Ken.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna have to
Okay,
look into
it was him.
I'm not terribly familiar with him. I'm gonna. Well, do I have a pen somewhere? Oh, there it is. I actually have a very, very nice pen that was given to me as a birthday present, I think. And
Nice.
yeah, it's quite fond of it. It writes very, very well.
Nice.
Oh, hey, that's my old tax form from Google. Thanks, Google. So
Thanks, Google.
yeah, they're like, oh, hey, look, this is all that crazy money you made. And I'm like, yeah, gee. Google. As we were saying, remember when their motto used to be "Don't be evil," and how suspicious it is that now that's not in there anymore?
Yep.
Yeah, it's like it
That's-
wouldn't have been suspicious that your motto doesn't have "Don't be evil" if that had never been there. But once you take that sign down, it's like, so now you are gonna be evil, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, and there. Thank you, Maya. Maya, who is one of my most long-standing supporters and mods, has posted a link to that debate. So if you do want to go watch it after this, you can. Let's see. I want to make sure that I didn't miss any because the chat has gone by a little bit quicker than I can keep up with while also asking questions. So, Ray Comfort. Yeah, this is from Mark Caesar, who says Ray Comfort edits his videos to make people look stupid and not know anything. Yeah, he absolutely does. It's gross. Let's see. David says, I would love to see one of these college randos ask Ray if he believes the Earth is a globe and see how well he does refuting the fluffer BS off the top of their head. Turnabout is fair play. Actually, have you ever seen any of the young Earth creationists try to debunk the flat Earth?
I don't think I have, but that sounds a lot like the pot calling the kettle black.
That's how it comes off. Yep. So let's see. Henry Hansen asks how old you are, but that's a question that you can feel free to answer or not.
I'm 23. I don't look it, but I swear I am.
You did say that at the beginning. I forgot about that. Let's see. I think there was another question that I'm missing. Oh, JS asks, what do you think of groups like BioLogos?
I mean, I have, like, growing up in a young Earth creationist house, I wasn't, like, super exposed to them, and I've only, like, now that I've come to, like, question all of that, I've only recently come into, like, come to be familiar with them, and, like, I think, like, lost my train of thought, I think that sort of stuff, like, is, like, helpful, because, like, you're demonstrating, hey, it doesn't have to be this huge dichotomy. You can accept mainstream science without having to leave your faith. That's chill.
Yeah. I tend to agree. I've sent people who are Christians but who are now kind of leaving the young Earth creationism aspect of their particular branch of Christianity, and I've directed them towards BioLogos because, like, it's my long-standing policy on this channel that, like, if you're at theistic evolution and an old Earth, as far as I'm concerned, that my job is done. You're now no longer denying the science. You're willing to listen to science at that point. You can integrate it with your faith. That's fine for me. Because one of my goals for why I bother trying to debunk pseudoscience in general is what came up on Dr. Dan's channel very recently. So if you go to Creation Myths, the channel, he recently had a video about professional young Earth creationists, authors, arguing on social media against their followers that their followers should take the vaccine for COVID-19. Oh no, there goes my monetization on this video. But, like, he points out, like, look, you trained these people to be anti-science, to think that science is always lying to them. It's your fault, at least partially, that these people are anti-vax. And it's a whole mindset. If you think that evolutionary biologists and geologists and astronomers are all lying to you, or they're just ignoring huge swaths of evidence, why wouldn't you also think the same thing about, drug manufacturers?
Right. Luckily, my parents were always very pro-vax, and, like, now they're, like, I don't know if I'd say they're pro-mask, but they're indifferent to it. They're maybe not as cautious as I'd like them to be, but they're at least not,
The cool kid says, if God is fake, then why is it called a praying mantis and not scientist mantis? Checkmate, atheists. Good point.
Checkmate, atheists.
That's there you go. You should set up your own apologetics channel with that argument. It's a great one.
He's just praying to Darwin or Richard Dawkins or whatever. That's what people think evolutionists do.
Actually, I think one of my favorite things that I ever read from C.S. Lewis, which is an odd thing to bring up, but he was complaining that Darwin Day just wasn't enough fun. He's like, I would celebrate Darwin Day if it weren't so damn boring. Light a bonfire, have a party. And it's like, yeah, no, I can see that. Because what did I do for Darwin Day? I gave a talk for like the Secular Society of MIT, which was fun, but like most people aren't going to get like super enthused about that. So,
right.
Yeah. Henry Hansen asks, "Are they vaccinated?" I'm not sure who the they are, but it is interesting to see to what degree young Earth creationists are anti-vaxxers, and it's a huge one. And it's
yeah, I think they might mean my parents. Yeah, my parents have gotten both doses. My brother and I have gotten both doses.
Oh, that's great. That's good to hear.
Yep.
Oh, Ben Hoven comes up with a good one. If there's no God, then what are all these churches for? And who is Jesus' dad? That's a nice Office reference there. I like it.
I love how people like actually bring up the proliferation of churches as proof. Like, yeah, a lot of people also believe things that are incorrect.
Yeah, it does seem to me like, okay, if that's a good argument for this religion, is it a good argument for all the other religions that are also doing pretty well in terms of numbers?
Yeah. And there was a comic, I don't remember who it was by, but it was like how to use Godwin's law to argue against fallacies. And one of them was how to argue against the fallacy of popularity. And it was like, just look how many supporters Hitler had.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of popular things that are not true. In fact, actually,
Yes.
Creationists like to point that out. They're like, oh, look, at one point everyone believed the Earth was flat and science was wrong. Science used to think that the universe was static. Science was wrong. And it's like, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, people learn things.
Right.
That's how learning works.
Have you seen there's an episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia where Mac tries to argue against evolution, and one of his big arguments is like, look, these scientists were wrong sometimes. And
I think I've seen the meme from that. I haven't seen the actual episode.
It's a good one, and the crazy thing to me is I was watching some Eric Hovind with Guts of Gibbon, and Eric made that argument. He didn't say, oh, making this guy look like a bitch and then slap a big label that says bitch on top of the person's face on a poster. But it boiled down to the same argument. He's like, look, Isaac Newton thought that you could, like, turn lead into gold, and he was wrong about, the gravity at large scales. And it's like, okay, it's not an argument. Oh, Henry Hansen has been to a Darwin Day party that had a Darwin cake. That's pretty cool, actually. I would go to one of those. Yes, that is exactly the thing. And yeah, Eric Hovind he basically just pulled that argument right out of Mac's mind. So yeah, it was weird.
I also find it weird when, like, on a related note, when they say, oh, this evolutionist thought this racist thing, therefore evolutionist is racism. And I'm like, oh, some scientist had a bad opinion. Ooh, what a shocker.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing. It's just like, hey, the guy who discovered the shape of DNA is a race realist. Does that make DNA have a different shape?
That was a huge, that I remember learning that and being like, I mean, it doesn't affect the truth of DNA, but
yeah, it's weird and gross, but like, it doesn't change the fact that he was right when he imaged DNA.
Right.
Mr. Lizard asks, what does Stephen think of Behemoth and Leviathan?
I don't know. I mean, like, people will be like, oh, certain people will be like, oh, they're dinosaurs, and because they need dinosaurs and humans to exist at the same time. And I'm like, they don't have to be. Like, they could just be, and I love elephants, so maybe I'm a little biased.
I tend to think,
Um,
especially Leviathan is a mythical creature. I don't think it's describing a real thing, and I think Behemoth is probably an elephant, maybe a hippo. The reason I
I've
think
been
maybe
keeping these
hippo.
by my webcam to help me remember to maintain eye contact.
Nice. Oh, you've been doing a good job.
Thank
Um,
you.
although
They've
technically,
been doing their job.
I haven't actually been maintaining much eye contact now that I think about it. I'm looking all over the place.
Yeah.
Oh well.
The stupid dinosaur eyes.
Let's see. Trying to see if there are any other questions. I'm basically just scanning for question marks. So guys, if you want to ask questions, please do tag me and put a question mark in it, so that way I really get it. Oh, Smitty says Gen 2 Pokemon suck. That's not fair. Yeah, there's look. I think most generations have their winners and their I guess losers in terms of Pokemon design, but I don't think any generation has just been bad overall. Um, yes, I have heard about Matt Powell's giant inflatable banana in his backyard that he calls Dr. Peel. I'm aware of that. In fact, Dr. Peel had
You're gonna insult my child? My precious child?
That's your Twitter avatar, isn't it?
Yeah, her evolution, actually.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much it for the questions that we're getting. So unless we get a few more questions pretty soon, I'm gonna start doing some wrap up stuff. So, Steven, your Twitter is linked in the description, and is there anything that you want to talk about? Anything you're doing coming up that people might want to know about?
I'm gonna start expanding my Toy House profile and with like adoptable characters, and also probably add those characters listings onto other websites. So if you've been looking for a cute cartoon character design to take into your fold and make one of your own characters, I'm possibly your guy.
Okay. And of course, like I said, Steven can be contacted at his Twitter, which is linked in the description. I'm double checking to make sure because I don't want to be a liar about that. Yes, it is. Okay, good. Sorry. I hate saying that and then realizing, oh, nope, that was a lie. So the cool kid asks, Steven, do you have a Cyndaquil, Quilava, or Typhlosion plush?
No.
Aw. Let's see. Mark Von Wisco says that Guts and Gibbons debate with Ken Hovind is also excellent. Absolutely, it is. Yeah, there has been a lot of really good Hovind debates in the past few years. I think that the recent Hovind debate's been way more fun to watch than his old stuff, where he goes into like some classroom with a projector with some college professor. Boring. Mostly because college professors, when they debate, they expect intellectual honesty from their debate opponents because that's how academics work. They expect everyone to be honest.
I suddenly remembered something I was going to say earlier.
Okay.
It was about the Kent Ham versus Bill Nye debate. I was like, when that went on, I was like a hardcore young Earth creationist, and even then, I thought Kent Ham was doing a terrible job. Like, he basically like defaulted to I'm right because my worldview says I'm right, and like, you can't do that, sir. You can't do that.
Yeah, it was.
The weird thing was he didn't even bring up the trees. Like, I know the trees have been debunked, but they're like the easy creationist argument, and he didn't even bring up the trees. I was sitting there with my mom, and we were both going, bring up the trees!
I've actually talked to a few people for whom that debate was like the start of the fall of the dominoes towards getting out of young Earth creationism because they thought that he did such a bad job.
Yeah, I didn't, like, that didn't start the fall of the dominoes for me. I just thought, like, because I believed what he was saying. I just thought he was doing a shitty job explaining it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I mean, he made money off of it, so I was gonna say it was a bad idea for him, but maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I haven't seen his financials. I presume he's doing pretty well, so I guess it wasn't a bad idea for him. But it certainly didn't make him look good, I think, to most people. All right, so I'm gonna go through a little bit of stuff for the channel, and then we're gonna get out of here. So let's see, upcoming on the channel. So Tuesday is unless something happens, going to be Eric with Erica. So look forward to that. That's where, in case anyone's new, that's where I take a look at Eric Hoven content with my friend Erica, the Gutsick Gibbon, who is now officially a primatologist, having published her work on primatology involving the effect of different social dynamics on sexual dimorphism in canine teeth in simiiforms, I believe. And of course, I'm going to get that wrong, and then she's going to come and be angry at me about getting what her research was on. But sorry, Erica. I'm pretty sure that I got that mostly right, at least. So that is going to be that. That's one of our sort of relaxed, hang back, do some drinking streams. So then Thursday, I think will be the next episode of the Revenge of the Biddle, which is the series I just started. It might be the next Speculative Evolution thing. I am... Basically what's going to happen is if I can get some art back from my volunteer artist, I will start recording that, and it should probably be out in time for Thursday. But if I can't get that back from him, I might have to do some more of my own art, which will delay things a little bit, so it might end up being a week or two away if that's the case. So let's see. I don't know if anything's happening a week from today. I might do another Spirit Science stream. If you guys really want another Spirit Science stream, let me know. The thing is, they take a lot out of me. And I do them early on Saturday, and it kind of makes the rest of my Saturday have to be like a recovery period, because they're rough to go through. This is a reason I do Kent with Bent late in the day. It's because I can then go to bed not long after. So yeah, guys, let me know if you really want another Spirit Science, because I can get that going. But I think that's basically it. Steven, thank you so much. I mean, even just for showing up, you've gone above and beyond several other people who I've tried to have on. So you just when you showed up, you already were in like the top section of guests I've had for Leaving Young Earth Creationism. I know, low bar, right? So thank you everyone who watched. Special thank you to Mark Caesar for his $5 redo super chat. I do appreciate it, you guys. Things like super chats and my channel members and patrons are what keeps this channel going. Because I absolutely couldn't keep doing it if you guys weren't supporting me. I mean, I'm not saying the channel would be gone, but it would be like once a month, maybe. There would be a recorded video. So, thank you guys very much for that. And I'm going to leave you guys with the end credits, where I thank everyone once again. All right, bye everybody. I just want to take a second to thank my channel members and patrons, especially those pledging $20 and above. Bob Knob, Bent Hovend, Ian Chen, Chris Love, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Bede, and Res Instance. My channel members and patrons help make this channel possible, and without their support, this channel really wouldn't exist. If you would like to help support the channel as a member or patron, there are links in the description to both join the channel as well as join the Patreon. Patrons and members get mentioned in these credit scenes, as well as getting early access to my scripted videos, and if you pledge $10 or above, you can also get access to various 3D assets that I create for Blender, both for use in the channel, as well as just general giveaways to my supporters to help in any Blender projects they might have. If a monthly or annual pledge isn't for you, then there is also a merch store linked to the description, and if none of that's right for you, please just like and subscribe, because every like and subscription really helps the video out. Thank you.